hint at some form of electrical instrument. This find, like so many others, is not generally publicized. It is considered too disturbing. In India, a high tower over a tomb discharged lightning against anyone who approached, striking them dead. Israel, 1000 BC. The house of Solomon the king was illuminated as by day, for in his wisdom he had made shining pearls, which were like unto the sun, the moon, and the stars in the roof of his house. In France, electrical knowledge was preserved by the secret Hebrew society called the Kabbalah. A dazzling lamp that lighted itself with no oil or wick, a door knocker that shocked unwelcome visitors, a Jewish rabbi named Jekeli, spelled Jechile, pushed a discharge button in his study that sent an electrical current into the iron knocker on his door. In Egypt, a wall carving depicts a scene where attendants seem to be carrying giant light bulbs with interior filaments in the shape of snakes connected to a box or switch with braided cables, and which strongly suggest powerful electric lamps supported by high-tension insulators. The cables are an exact copy of engineering illustrations as currently used. The cable is shown as very heavy and striated, S-T-R-I-A-T-E-D, striated, indicating a bundle of many multi-purpose conductors rather than a single high-voltage cable. In Egypt, in an Isle temple, Isis temple, a lamp burned with neither wind nor water, and which neither wind nor water could extinguish. Until the invention of electric lighting in 1890, we possessed only candles, torches, and oil lamps, light sources which smoked and left sooty deposits on ceilings. Likewise, the Greek and Roman world used torches and oil lamps for illumination. And wherever passageways are still standing between ancient buildings, traces of smoke can be found on the ceilings. How then do we explain the following? In Egypt, no trace of smoke is found in any Egyptian pyramid or in the subterranean tombs of the pharaohs, which are beautifully carved and painted in several colors. Work of this precision and delicacy requires the equivalent of daylight. Some tunnels and passageways are too complex for a mirror system to have brought sufficient light into the inner chambers. In Western Europe, the walls and ceilings of certain painting caves show no traces of torches or of oil lamps. In Peru, low ceilings and passageways of Inca and pre-Inca ruins show no evidence of smoke blackening. In Brazil, explorer Fawcett found ancient dwellings and dead cities of the Mato Grosso devoid of lamp smoke. In Egypt, Babylon as early as 2000 BC, Central Australia, China, and Bulgaria as early as 3000 BC. Electroplated objects have been found, indicating the use of electricity. Now that's an important one. It's important because electroplating is something that's recent. That's where we have a process that we can take gold, for instance, and we can plate that gold onto, say, a silver fork, or we can plate it onto some other object, and we can make it appear like the object is gold or silver by electroplating. Now, when you go into the archaeological digs and you pull an object out of King Tut's tomb and it's been electroplated, when you go into Egypt, Babylon, Central Asia, China, and Bulgaria, and we're not just talking about one isolated civilization like Egypt, and gee, look how smart they were. They not only had it in Egypt, they had it in Babylon, they had it in Central Australia, they had it in China, and they had it in Europe. Electroplating was known all over the world. Now, I don't know that we know that it's there in North and South America, but it's on every other continent. Now that's quite a find. Why isn't that being put? Why aren't those objects being put on display in our museums? Why aren't we being told about that in our colleges and universities? That's a pretty significant find. Now, up until this particular item, this is number 12, in this section here on electricity, you know, you could sit there and say, well, you know, there's no smoke found in any Egyptian pyramid. That doesn't mean they had electricity. Let's think about that for a second. And you get here into these pyramids, and it's hundreds of feet of tunnels that you have to go through in order to get into this tomb. You get into the tomb, and here is very fine, delicate artwork. Not something that somebody just pasted on the wall. It's a stick figure, that somebody painted on there. This is something that's very, very intricate in painting. In fact, there's a section in here called Art. I'll cover that one next on page 239. And this art thing over here, and I'm not an artist, so I didn't know this, but this art over here, you can actually grade this. You can determine how advanced a civilization is by looking at their art. And the artwork that we find in these ancient pyramids, in these ancient ruins, is superior to anything until the Middle Ages. And I'll read that story to you when we get to it. But I wanted to cover this electricity because I think electricity is pretty fundamental. Now, from the time Ben Franklin discovered electricity by flying his famous kite with a key on it in a thunderstorm until we had electric lights in 1890 was about 100 years. From about 1790 to 1890, about 100 years, we developed electric lights. Ben Franklin wasn't technologically advanced in electricity or electronics. But in 100 years, watch what happens. 100 years later, we've got computers in 1990. Now, these people before the flood were living to be 900 years old. Now, picture a civilization in which people don't die, for hundreds of years. When I develop my knowledge, I have to write that down. My entire working career started at about age 30. From age 0 to age 30, I didn't accomplish anything in life. I'd never written a book. I'd never written anything down of any consequence. Maybe a couple of love letters to my girlfriend. That was about the extent of my writing career. From age 30 until age 65, I have written, I couldn't count the number of books that I've written. I probably have 50 or 75 books. I wrote a lot of material. I write on legal subjects, and I have a lot of written material here. I teach school. I write most of the material that goes into my textbooks. Now, I'm going to die here pretty shortly. Certainly within the next 30 years, I'm going to be history. I'm going to be dead and buried. My entire working career, everything that I have learned, everything that I have written down and preserved for the next generation had to have been done in about 40 working years. Can you imagine what I could accomplish if I could live to be 300 years old? Can you imagine how much I would write, how much I would know, how much I could disseminate to the next generation if I had 300 years to do what I've done over the past 40? So it doesn't strike me as being preposterous that people before the flood had developed electricity and electric light bulbs. Hell, we did it in the last 200. Adam didn't even have children until he was 130. The guy lives to be, 930 years old. He could have done it by himself. All right. Furthermore, it's been reported that those people before the flood were smarter than we are today. Their IQs were better. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but I wouldn't doubt it. We're digging up now in archaeological digs, we're digging up the evidence that they had electroplating, for crying out loud. That's pretty significant metallurgy. Then the Bible reports that they were artificers in brass and iron in Genesis chapter 4. Now, people that are artificers in brass and iron are advanced. They're ahead of casting cannon in sand, which is where we were with Columbus in 1500. So from 1500 to 2000, we had made gigantic strides in metallurgy. We were making railroad rails, building iron ships by 1900. Now look where we're at. We have aluminum, titanium, all kinds of metal and metallurgy that now make our modern technology possible, such as computers. Now, there's an electric battery from ancient Babylon. There's a diagram here by Andrew Thomas, and it's in the form of a clay pot with an electrode down through the bottom, which holds the acid inside, with an iron rod, copper cylinder, earthenware jar, copper disc, wire out the top, with a pitch collar, and an unknown electrolyte. That's what they dug out back in the 1880s, and then took it back to the British Museum. Didn't know what they had. You dig something out of the ground, and you say, well, I don't know what this is. It almost reminds me of the medical scientists, They take a look at human anatomy 100 years ago and say, well, these are vestigial organs. We don't know what a tonsil or an adenoid or an appendix does in the body, so therefore, because of our theory of evolution, we believe that these are vestigial organs. And so when I was a kid, they used to cut people's tonsils and adenoids out. I don't know how I survived it. I guess it was my old granny who used to say, if God had intended then he would have done. That was her mantra. If God had intended that, he would have done it. If God had intended that your adenoids and your tonsils be removed, he wouldn't have made you with them. That was her thinking in life. And so I survived through the World War II period with my tonsils and adenoids. It was just common. You know, you had tonsils and adenoids, you go to the doctor and they remove them. Every kid in school had his tonsils and adenoids removed. Now we find out it's a part of your immune system. One doctor reported he had never seen a case of cancer in a person who had tonsils and adenoids. It's a part of your immune system, kids. Now, we routinely went through our population and removed everybody's tonsils and adenoids. We have the highest incidence of cancer in the world. I thought I'd pass that one on to you. All right, so there's the story on electricity. Now, just to give you an illustration here, let me find electricity. There are 66 stories on electricity. There are 969 records. 66 of those records are on archaeological finds around the world.